Hello, everyone. Today you will hear an interesting story. I sometimes reflect on my past life and wonder if I was fortunate. My wife, Christy, and I used to live in a small one-room apartment in the big city. We both worked in manufacturing where we met and later got married. For about 13 years, our life was relatively stable. We had been saving little by little, dreaming of buying our dream home and adopting a child. Although Christy couldn't have children, I loved her just as much. That's how we lived. But one day our fate took an unexpected turn. The downsizing at the factory was a real blow to us. We felt the harsh reality of unemployment after losing our jobs. But we didn't give up. We sent out our resumes constantly and went for interviews, but to no avail. We began to go through a rough patch in our lives and had to dip into our savings. A few months went by, and just when all seemed lost, something unexpected happened. Christy received a letter from the notary. Her uncle, whom we hadn't seen in years, had passed away and left her his inheritance. The letter mentioned a house in the countryside that now belonged to her, making her the sole heiress. We couldn't believe our luck. Although we felt sorry for her uncle's passing, it was an opportunity for us to start fresh. We decided to sell our apartment and move into our new house. Life there turned out to be wonderful, with no noise and hustle of the city, just peace and quiet. I decided to pursue my dream of becoming a writer, and it was the perfect time for it. Christy completed her design courses and began working remotely. A year later, I published my first book with the help of my publisher, and the profits were enough for our livelihood. Everything seemed to be falling into place, and we could finally enjoy life. I had even started talking about having a baby again, but for some reason, Christy no longer had the desire to start a family. She was content with what she had and enjoyed working from home. Occasionally, she would go into town for business, and I noticed she was starting to drift away from me. One day, I decided to have a picnic near our house on a beautiful lawn with a nice view. "Chris, I noticed something has been bothering you. You seem sad lately. Please share it with me." "It's okay," I said. "It's just that the new job is a little tiring. I mean, I've lived my whole life differently. Don't mind me." We continued our vacation outdoors, and she talked about her work, trying to act casual. One day, I decided to go into town more often, just to take a drive and see how things had changed during our absence. I visited some familiar places and decided to check out the fair, which had just opened. As I wandered between the entertainment booths, I noticed my wife. My surprise then took over when I decided to approach her and saw that she was not alone, but in the company of a man dressed in an expensive suit. "Hello, Christy," I said as I went over to them. "Oh, hello. I didn't expect to see you here," she replied, looking a little confused. "I thought I'd go out." "Who's your friend?" I asked, looking at the man questioningly. "This is Elliot. We work in the same firm, and now we have a new project together," my wife explained. Elliot held out his hand in greeting, and not wanting to seem impolite, I shook it back. "Yeah? What's that?" I asked. "Oh, we've been commissioned to do the interior of a new campaign office," Elliot told me. I looked at him and my wife suspiciously, then she abruptly changed the subject. We said a quick goodbye to Elliot and spent some more time at the fair before returning home. Thoughts of her co-worker kept me busy. Their presence at the fair was strange. What were the two of them doing there? I couldn't get the questions out of my head. When she was at home, Christy was often on the phone, obviously texting. One day, I noticed that she had left it on the nightstand, obviously having forgotten it, so I decided to sneak a peek. But unfortunately, the phone was locked, and I could not find out anything. Attempts to talk to her again yielded no results, but a strange feeling did not leave me, so I decided not to leave things as they were. I decided to follow her when she was going into town, explaining it was just another business matter. Already in town, I saw her go into some building that looked like an office. I waited a couple of hours in the cafe across the street. When she came out, she wasn't alone. She was accompanied by Elliot. I wondered how their meeting would end, so I continued my surveillance. I saw them heading toward the waterfront, where they had their date on a bench under a tall tree. But later, I realized that Elliot wasn't just an employee of hers when I saw them kissing. I felt so hurt that I just wanted to drown them. After all, what was she missing? How could she trade me for some guy who wasn't even remotely handsome in person? I wanted to walk right up to them, but for some reason, I decided to wait and see how it ended. They didn't stay there long, and then they each went their separate ways. I followed Elliot. "You wait on," I shouted to him as he was about to enter the office building. He turned to me and looked at me with interest. "Yeah? Can I help you?" he asked. "Oh, are you the man from the fair?" I asked, referring to Christie's husband. "Christie's husband? Isn't he?" "Yes, that's right. I'd like to talk." "All right, come on in." He invited me inside. We ended up in an office with expensive furniture. On some of the shelves, in addition to large binders of documents, were the frames of Elliot's acknowledgments and accomplishments. As I walked past them, I had time to examine them. "So what exactly did you want to tell me?" He sat down at the table in a leather chair and with his fingers interlocked in front of him, leaned against the table. "Yes, I wanted to talk about my wife. I saw you on the boardwalk. I want you to leave her alone." "She's my wife." "Oh, so that's what this is about," he grinned. "Yes, I knew she was married, but she made her own choice. I liked her very much, and she accepted my proposal. I give her a lot, and she's helping me make a good profit. So you have to go?" I certainly didn't expect that kind of chutzpah. It's like being in someone else's body and living someone else's life. How dare you say that to me? I was beginning to fill with anger now, and I felt the blood rush to my temples. Elliot didn't seem to be the type to give up on short notice, and it didn't look like they were in love. But I wasn't going to put up with the role of being a cuckold, so I decided to make things clear. When I demanded that he back off again, he explained that they had a contract with Christie and she couldn't leave him. She was obligated to fulfill the role of his concubine. I didn't understand the whole point of his speech, of course, but I was hurt by the concubine thing, and I wanted to attack him with my fists. But as if on cue, two thugs burst into the office, grabbed me by the arms, and took me outside. I realized that I couldn't go inside now, so I decided to go home and have a serious talk with my wife. When I arrived, she was already in the kitchen and greeted me with a smile that disappeared almost immediately when she saw me angry. I took her by the hand and sat her down at the table. "Tell me," I said. "What?" She looked at me, frightened. "What do you mean?" I notified her of my conversation with Elliot and demanded a detailed explanation. Christie seemed to realize that her secret was out, and with a heavy sigh, she decided to confess everything to me. But first, she got me to promise that I would listen to her story to the end. I agreed, and she told me that when she was applying, Elliot noticed her abilities and helped her to get the position she wanted. At first, everything was fine, but then he challenged her to a frank conversation and demanded intimacy. She, of course, refused, but he showed her a document which stated that I had to provide him with certain services. If I refused, all her property, including the house, would go to him. Christie swore she didn't remember signing that document. Perhaps it was at a party when they were celebrating the completion of one of their projects. Then she did sign something, but she thought it was an award receipt form. I became enraged by this. I asked Christie exactly what kind of profit she was making by quoting Elliot, and she told me something that infuriated me even more. She confessed that sometimes she had to please some of Elliot's partners. I jumped up from my chair and started rushing around the kitchen, shouting my indignation alternately with curses. When I asked her how she could have and why she hadn't told me right away, Christie couldn't answer. She admitted that she was ashamed, but she had no choice. I looked at my wife, at how calmly she was telling me all this, and I thought for a moment that she herself liked what she was doing. My thoughts and feelings were mixed up. I needed to think things through. I scolded my wife for keeping quiet, got a beer out of the fridge, and went outside. I did not sit there very long, parsing the information I had received in my head. I could not leave the situation as it was. My feelings for my wife were different now. I couldn't allow myself to be treated that way. She had stabbed me in the back, and I couldn't forgive her for that. When I had calmed down a little and gotten my anger under control, I came up with a plan that would help me get rid of Elliot in some way. I'd been thinking for a long time, and I had an idea of how to get Christy out of her freelance duties. Yes, she wondered. And what do you propose? We could transfer all your property to me, I suggested. That way, when you turn that guy down, he can't take anything away from you. Christy thought about it and seemed to like the idea. Soon she agreed. We consulted a lawyer, and of course I had to tell him the truth. But he confirmed my story and helped us with the paperwork. Now half the job was done. I had the peace of mind that I wouldn't have to live on the street again. And Christy wouldn't have to be a slut for some uncles. That was it. Now call your cavalier and tell him you won't be doing his bidding anymore, I told my wife, carefully packing the documents in a bag and then hiding them in the safe. Christy obeyed and dialed the number with a trembling hand. I could hear Elliot yelling on the other end, but I reassured Christy that she didn't have to worry about anything. Later that evening, we had a visitor. It was pouring heavily outside when a car pulled up, and a man in a long hooded raincoat stepped out. Raincoat got out. The doorbell rang. We were sitting in the kitchen, and at that moment lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, and Christy was frightened, like a horror movie heroine. I went to open the door. Elliot stepped across the threshold, rainwater dripping from his raincoat, and he dropped it on the floor. I came to get mine. If you two think you can just get rid of me, you're dead wrong. He hissed, "Where is the whore?" He moved inside the house, but I rushed to stop him. Sometimes he'd manage to sneak under my attacks or fight his way out. Without stopping the fight and the verbal altercation, we made our way to the kitchen where Christy was hiding. "Oh, so that's where you are? Do you think you can get rid of me?" "Not gonna happen. Pack it up. I told you she's not going anywhere." I continued to protest and struck again at the guest's jaw. He grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and pinned me to the kitchen counter. His hands crawled to my neck, and I began to feel like I was suffocating. But my life was very precious to me, and I wasn't about to say goodbye to it. Pushing my adversary away from me with one hand and rubbing the table with the other, I fumbled for the knife, grabbed it, and stabbed it into Elliot with force. His grip began to loosen, and I felt like I could breathe into my lungs again. Elliot let go of me and grabbed the knife sticking out of his stomach. He stepped back a little, staggering, and soon collapsed to the floor. Christy looked on in horror at what was happening. I stroked my throat, which was now safe. "What have you done?" she asked me. "Did you kill him?" For a moment, I even thought she felt sorry for him. I went over to her and told her not to worry about anything. Then I went over to the wounded man, who was no longer showing any signs of life. I put my fingers to his neck and tried to feel for a pulse, but to no avail. Elliot was dead. I sat down in the chair, resting my head on my fist. Now I had to get rid of the body. But how? Actually, I hadn't killed him on purpose. It was self-defense. I turned to Christy and told her to call the police and ordered her to confirm the version of self-defense. She fortunately agreed. It didn't take us long to get to the police station to testify. Fortunately, the angels above blessed us, and the police did not press murder charges against me. My actions were recognized as self-defense, and my wife and I went home. A week or so passed, and I convinced Christy to quit her job. We tried to live our lives as before, but inside me, the feeling of insult wouldn't go away. I still felt as if I had been wronged, and my feelings for my wife were no longer the same. More accurately, I no longer felt the same love for her, but rather resentment and anger for her actions. For her actions, I could not forgive her for a long time. One day, I brought her papers to sign. "What is it?" she asked. "They are divorce papers. I can't live with you anymore." "You disgust me," I said frankly. "But how so?" "I hoped you forgave me because I was a victim of deceit." "Victim?" I interrupted her. "You think you're a victim? But it was you who deceived me and laid down with other men without any regret." "Go away." "But this is my home," she objected. "Well, no. Have you forgotten that you gave me all the papers yourself?" "Everything belongs to me now. Go wherever you want." I felt a sense of relief, having thus avenged my wife who had betrayed me. Soon she packed her things and went to her parents, and I never saw her again. And I decided to write another book in which I told my story. Dear listeners, your support is very important to us. If you like our story, please like, comment, and subscribe. It's very motivating for us. We need your feedback to improve our content.